I love the speedster. I love even just the quick things
Red
they do
Rush,
with him.
yes.
Yes, he's on a date with his girlfriend.
Yep, that's my favorite too. I love Red Rush.
He goes and saves the world really quick. It's like, you promised you'd listen to me.
And I love that he's from Russia and that.
So we're doing an Invincible book club. I just stopped you guys from talking a little bit about the show. So I guess that is where we'll start. I'm Zeb, Zebulon. I started reading it whenever I was like 13, like 12, like somewhere around there. When it was, it had been popular for a while, I think. But, and I was just obsessed. And I remember thinking Invincible is not DC. It's not Marvel, so it is the coolest thing ever, and Invincible is now my favorite superhero. I haven't seen all of the show. I've seen the first season and maybe a little bit of the second season. I'm rewatching it now, trying to do it in tandem. But now I really like Invincible. I don't feel the same way I did when I was 13, especially the comics, which we'll get more into.
Well, when you're around that age of looking up to someone in high school, that it can be very aspirational and very exciting. And looking back on that as an adult, you just naturally have different feelings because you're now looking back at a high school surrogate when you've had those experiences and get to compare and contrast what you did. Where when you're young, you look up to a character in high school, similar to how I'm sure I did with Peter Parker, and you're like, you one day I'll be in this position and I'll be grappling with what I want to do in the world and the impact I want to make. And so that's, as someone who hadn't heard about the character until the show came out, it's cool to think about it from that younger lens.
Yeah. Now it's a little hard not to look back and be like, man, these cringy kids.
Yes. Yes. So Doug and I have been like trying to keep ourselves from talking about the fact that we didn't love these first two volumes or these first 8 issues. It's not that personally, it's not that I dislike them. I mean, it's weak writing. Like, it is, like, very simplistic. We'll probably talk more about it, but I do think the show has improved it. The Invincible introduction, the introduction into the world, the pacing of the big reveal of... I'm terrible with characters' names, which is going to be awful for this. I should always just have a list up to the side. But the dad... Omni-Man.
Nolan.
Go Omni.
Yes. Yeah, I think his whole thing is much, much better in the show. But okay, so before we get too deep into it, so Connor, your first introduction was the show. You're caught up on the show.
Yes. I was introduced to the comic and the character via hearing about the show, hearing it hyped up. When I first heard about it, it felt like it was being introduced alongside The Boys, which, because it's a superhero show that comes out on Prime, I think that was an inevitable comparison point. But
Rogen also produces both of them.
His involvement feels a lot more obvious with Invincible, so I sometimes forget that he's involved with The Boys. But you're totally right. And the fact that it has... and I think was always advertised as being a little more brutal and bloody. And I assumed that there would kind of be
the cool superhero.
Yeah. And so I think I came in assuming that it would kind of have that darkness that something like The Boys has. And while there's certainly a lot of violence and mature themes, I do think it still like captures the like goofiness of superheroes in a lot of ways and like the fun fantasy of it and doesn't forget that. And I think that was my initial impression of the show, was feeling like this had a lot more depth. It had some characters that had something deeper going on within them, which upon reading the comics, I can now see that I think the show does some more of that heavy lifting up front than necessarily these first 8 issues did. But fell in love with that first episode. It ends similarly to the ending of of issue 7 that we
8.
read for today.
Or,
And
yeah, it was
so
7, yeah.
it was interesting thinking about my first time watching Invincible, which I think was at Doug's apartment, if I'm not mistaken, as we got together to watch it. And yeah, reading these first 8 issues really revitalized those feelings of sitting down and engaging with these characters for the first time. Yeah, I've continued to watch the show since. I've never read the comic, but always intended to. And so whenever this opportunity to talk about it with y'all came up, it was serendipitous. It was perfect timing.
Perfect excuse.
And the good reason to jump into it. So
yeah, absolutely. Douglas, how about you? What was your kind of like initial thoughts on Invincible and the show and the comic? We can start getting deeper into the comic now too, and everybody just kind of jump in and interrupt Doug whenever you want.
Please do. No, I mean, very similar to Connor. I had never heard of Invincible until the show came out, and I really hadn't even heard much buzz around it or even the vibe of the show. I remember we just threw it on at my apartment and I went into it not really knowing anything. Especially after reading the first couple issues of the comics, I'm grateful that I started with the show because, like you both have alluded to, the initial setup I think is really good, especially the big reveal of, Omni-Man going crazy against the Guardians of the Globe. And I have such a vivid memory of watching the first episode and it sort of thinking that this show, it has that sort of Saturday morning vibe. And the one thing I had heard was that it's a more adult cartoon. And I kept thinking, where is that component of it? It seems so positive and cheery and, fun and campy. And then out of nowhere, you get that surprise. And it hits a lot harder than it does in the issue of the comics where that happens.
I liken it to you remember graphics being better when you were younger in your favorite video game, when they were trying to emulate a realism. And then you go back and you're like, this looks like shit. What the hell was I thinking? But I thought this was the realest thing ever. I remember that reveal being crazy.
Maybe it's because I knew it was coming. Maybe that's a large part of it.
But that being said, I had basically, since watching the show, turned the comic book into the show in my head, in my memory. When I reread it and I got to that moment, I was expecting to see the Guardians actually putting up a bigger fight, but they don't at all. He just chops off all of their heads.
It's 2 pages.
3 pages that each have maybe 3 to 4 panels a piece versus a 3 to 4 minute action sequence that is seamless and shows a bunch of different power sets. I actually enjoyed issue 7 a lot. I have been in a bit of a DC kick in my personal comic reading, and so seeing the Global Guardians
Justice League.
so similar to the Justice League, and often even in 2 to 3 pages just satirizing each character very, very quickly. I really appreciated and found fun.
The Darkwing Batman.
Yes.
And even just the quick world building of using criminals who, one criminal who lives there and one who's a fish out of water and has just moved there.
Yep.
And so he's just giving him the lowdown on Darkwing's, Night City, a city that is perpetually in darkness. All of that was super cool, super well done.
I love that. It almost is a joke about each person very quickly, saying oh no, Gotham isn't just the dark and brooding town. Here, Gotham literally is always night. It will never actually have a sunrise. Oh, you thought that Wonder Woman kind of had this macho machismo that you could call a little bit manly. Well, here we're going to have her with a female partner, and we're going to call her War Woman, and we're going to really lean into those more masculine parts. Every character was either a really funny one-line joke about that character, or if they had 2 or 3 pages, also added in jokes about their setting, and even a couple jokes that are very specific to the lore of those characters, which was fun to see.
And they talk about, I don't know if it's in the compendium, I imagine it is, but maybe it's all at the back, but there's little behind the scenes bits at the end of the volumes. And one of the things that the creator, I think Robert Kirkman, or is that the show?
Kirkman is the creator of the comic, and I think is the writer for pretty much every issue, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Yes. My compendium has a breakdown of all of the different artists and letterers and the various issues they wrote on. But he is just writer with no issue discernment needed because he did every single one.
Cool. Hell yeah. His whole story of getting to this is really cool. He had been trying to get something going for a long time with some other comics. I think one of the initial attempts is actually Invincible's favorite comic in this, which is Science Dog. He was actually trying to get Science Dog going as its own comic book at first. And then there's some controversy, I don't know, that's maybe a strong word, but a little bit of controversy with, I think soon we're going to be looking at a completely different artist's interpretation of Invincible. There had been some talk of him being a little heartless with cutting out that guy, the initial artist.
Oh, the artist from the first 7 issues?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see a little bit of that stylistic change in 8. As I was flipping through the rest of the compendium,
I was going to say, is 8
yes. 8 is where it switches, and
he does a good job of mimics it less.
It's gradual, and full disclosure for the audience, before we started the pod, I have total read, I think, the first 8 volumes of the comics, and then we got the idea to start. But today I went back and read volumes 1 and 2 again, just so it was fresh. Even if it was a little heartless, I love the new artist so much more.
Yeah, Corey Walker is the original artist, and Ryan Otley, I believe. Apologies for mispronunciation there, but I think Ryan Otley takes over after that. And yeah, I agree. I think the colors pop a little more under Otley's vision. I think there's a little bit more specificity in the design of everybody,
especially like backgrounds. The backgrounds to the panels have a lot more detail, or at least like texture to them.
Agreed.
The original artist, it was pretty flat. I felt like still good. I mean, still doing something I could never ever do.
Well, of course,
but,
yeah.
My favorite piece of art in those first 7 issues, with Corey Walker doing the penciling, is whenever Invincible is fighting Alan out in space, and just the black canvas with those white stars and suns peppered in throughout. I thought that was gorgeous. But I also would agree that, once you got to issue 8, everything kind of seems to click in, and it has a little bit more of its own style.
The big thing that I notice is how small of eyes the new artist can draw. The initial artist goes very quickly to turning them into just single dots. I'll show some examples of the single dotted eyes, but as soon as that character gets a little small, his eyes turn into their eyes turn into black dots, which isn't, again, like nothing I could ever accomplish, and it's still pretty cool, and also kind of like stylistic, but there's just way more detail, and it gets even greater. I don't know how far into Invincible I read when I was a youth. I haven't read it since I was like 14, 15, something around there.
So this reread is very fresh for you.
Yeah, and I even haven't engaged much with the show in some time, and
because I believe that last time you and I were talking about it, I think that since Connor and I have finished season 4 of the show, we at this point have maybe seen more of the total story.
Yes.
Than
interesting.
You
okay.
The comics when you were younger.
Yeah. You guys know a little more.
We'll try not to spoil some stuff.
It's okay if we get into some spoilers or whatever. I mean, this is kind of a unique. I generally would be hyper against any sort of spoilers, but we're kind of in an odd, unique territory where we're engaging with this stuff that in two different mediums, basically, and across a big spectrum of my life. Like I don't know, and then we're doing a podcast about it. It's kind of so obscure and weird anyway. I don't really care about spoilers nearly as much as I would.
I think we can definitely avoid them. I did want to say I think it'd be hard for me to not compare at least the volumes that we've read to like when I was watching that on the screen.
Yeah.
That was just naturally happening for me as I was reading. And that reminds me, one of the biggest things that I kept thinking about throughout these first two volumes was just Debbie's character is so much more fleshed out in the show. I really think pretty much all of the female characters in the show are significantly better written. All their dialogue, everything is much more interesting. At least at this stage in the comics, they really just relegate Debbie to worrying about when they're coming home for dinner, and that's like the beginning and end of her character through these first two volumes. And pretty immediately in the show, they show her as like a powerhouse woman. Like it's much more interesting. I think.
If anything, I read the 8 issues today, and then in between reading those and our call, as I was doing some stuff around the house, I threw on the first episode and a half of the show just to, like you were saying, compare and contrast, because it's hard not to want to do. And there's an excellent scene in the first episode where that is not in the comics, where Mark makes an offhand comment whenever she tells him to come inside and get ready, where he says, "No, what are you going to do? How are you going to make me?" And she very quickly calls him out and says, "Does that power make you feel good?" And then launches into something about like, "Hey, for many years, you and I were the normal people with your special superhero dad. And now all that's changing. And I hope you don't lose sight of the fact that your normal old mom is a person who deeply cares about you and is as special as any of you folks who do have powers." And it was my favorite scene in that first episode, rewatching it. Certainly the one that I didn't remember that was there, that really stuck out on a rewatch. And to your point about how she's portrayed in the comics, you do wish that there was a little bit more of that depth, because you don't have to necessarily make her incredibly unique in these special ways. You just need to give her a depth of dialogue that shows that she's more than a mom worried about if she's going to eat dinner alone tonight.
Yeah. I'm super glad you brought that up. That was the scene that had popped into my head a few weeks ago when I had read these first two volumes. Because her specific line is something like you said, does it make you feel strong knowing that I can't physically make you do something? Like, does that make you feel like a man?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's just such good writing. And comic book Debbie just doesn't quite have anything that really comes close to that.
I wonder also, like, I keep feeling like, you mentioned that they're doing like heavy lifting, up front in the show. I remember characters across the board getting more depth as the comic series goes on. And I wonder how much we're eventually going to get to those parts and be like, oh, they just put that in the first episode. Which is, arguably what the comic book should have done, is like give as many people depth as quickly as possible. Because even like Mark's attitude about like citizens and about like saving people, he seems really like cold in the comic, like in these first issues. I can't remember specifically, I should have written a note, but there was a couple of times where he just seemed kind of just like mean and violent, I guess. Like he didn't seem at all like a superhero, and it feels like the show spend some time being like, this is a sensitive growing boy, like he cares for other people. Yes, he wants to be a superhero, but he's also like, he's a little sweetheart, and like you don't really get sweetheart vibes from him in the comic, at least not yet.
I definitely agree. I think a lot of these first two volumes, it almost feels like he's finding his stride with the characters. Like he, I keep forgetting the creator's name.
Robert Kirkman.
Yes. Robert Kirkman. It feels like maybe he even knows where he wants the plot to go, but that he is still figuring out exactly how he wants to portray all of these characters. And even having read, a few more volumes in the comics, there is a bit more depth that I'm sure we will get to. But it does feel like he himself is almost figuring that out. And whenever, given the chance to recontextualize some things in the beginning with the show, I think some of that depth is more immediately seen in his characters.
It makes sense. How old was he? Because I know that this was like his first big break into the how.
While you're looking that up, I also think that there's an element about this not being from one of our major two comics publishers, Marvel or DC, where they know that the audience for this is a little bit older than their other audiences, and they know that there's less of a need for their main hero for the universe to have this inherent altruism that is logline from the first issue. There's no need to say here's the values of a Captain America, or here's the logline about responsibility that will motivate Spider-Man. Like, I think Mark is given the room and space here to be a little selfish in his motivations, and I don't think selfish in a way that is getting in the way of his heroics or is making him do bad. But I do think he is motivated by proving himself to his dad, and also proving himself to be a hero to himself. And he wants to know that he's that guy and know that he's capable of this. And I don't know that it's the saving people or the not killing people or any of that value that is motivating him as much as his desire to prove something to himself and his family.
Which does make me think of it in the sense of probably how I felt about it when I was younger, and not in like a negative way, but like the motivation. His motivations are realistic. Like, realistically, a 16-year-old kid is going who got superpowers is going to be much more invested in proving himself to his dad, and proving that he's a badass, that he is invincible, and using his powers to get with the prettiest girl in high school. It's like, these are the motivations that you probably have.
He's a good kid, and also he's a teenager in high school, and thus his motivations are a little self-serving. And that's not to say that his actions are then amoral, but I don't think his actions are done with virtuous intents.
There was one thing that just ticked me off as like almost, like you said, amoral. Like, almost was bending that line of like just a little bit. Does no one remember? Did nobody get an icky feeling in these?
I assume it's when he beats someone in a fight. I assume, or no?
Yeah.
When the guy goes into the locker.
I'm too stupid. Robert Kirkman was 24 to 26.
Oh, okay.
He was writing Invincible. So, I mean, that makes... I also don't... There's only so much an issue of a comic book can do. Yes, dialogue could have been written with more depth and gotten, punchier. And like you said, I think it kind of does with time. But these first issues are setting up an entire universe. And it's it does the universes of Justice League and the Avengers, mostly Justice League, are doing a lot of that heavy lifting, which he talks about in a bit of the behind the scenes, where he's like, how do you get people to care about a character in a single page? And it's like, well, just make them Batman. Like, it's like this one's Batman. You like Batman, right?
Yep.
This one's Captain America. You like Captain America, right?
Let's do 3 of those, and then we'll just show you a fish guy for a page, and you'll get that he's Aquaman, and we'll move on.
Yes, exactly. I love that bit in Aquaman. I think it was in the show too. It shows everybody's kind of complex lives, and then it gets to Aquaman or whatever his name is. Yeah, and he's just like, shit, thank God, like, get going.
He's the only one who I don't think that he was named until the following issue when they were listing off the folks who had died, and I believe his name was Aqueous. But I love that in the actual issue 7 where he's introduced, you've done so much of the Justice League allegory that you don't even need to give him a name or say anything. You can just have him sitting on a throne and the story tells itself. Yep.
You are correct about his name, because I remember when I was reading it and I read his name again, it reminded me of Sextina Aquafina from BoJack.
There you go.
And I had a nice chuckle. No, I definitely agree with what you guys are saying about, it kind of reflecting him more as your maybe average high school boy in the comics in that way. I think for me, if I were to very succinctly say why I think the intro in the show was more impactful for me than the comics was, I feel like the struggle, both in like internal and external struggles that all of the characters, but specifically Mark, was experiencing in like the first 2 episodes of the show was much more evident. I think even particularly like wanting his powers to make his dad proud, or to prove to his dad that he can get the powers. I remember in the show them spending a lot of time like conversations between Nolan and Debbie and Mark and his son, and Nolan trying his best not to have these like disappointed looks on his face whenever Mark wasn't having his powers, and Mark really feeling like he wasn't living up to what he knew his dad wanted him to be. And I think some of that was just missing in these early issues of the comics, even though you got a little bit of it.
Do you see, we won't get too deep into it because, we'll get there on later episodes, but do you see a little more of that? Because I just have this weird disconnect in my head with, like, what I remember the comics being. What I remember the comics being has been completely poisoned by what I know the show is in recent years. Does that get more... does he get more depth and more, like... I don't know. Like disconnect with his dad, I guess. Other than when it gets really violent.
Yeah. From what I have read, definitely more depth than we've seen in these first 2 volumes. Maybe not quite the struggle that we still see in the show, the internal struggles that we sometimes see. But also, I also haven't made it very far in the comics yet, so I wouldn't be surprised if we really start to get some of that. And I mean, I know just general discourse online, I've always seen people say that the comics are better. Actually, up until a few episodes ago in season 4 is when I started seeing a lot of stuff online of people saying, okay, the show's better. But I had always heard people say that the comics just had a bit more going for them than the show through the first like 3.5 seasons. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a lot more depth, especially with Mark, as we get through more of the comics.
Because, one of the things I remember us talking about when the show first premiered, and you were just curious about some of the differences. And I can't, I'm so worried that I'm just making stuff up in my head now, that William comes out as gay, I think, in the comics later, versus him just being gay. But now I don't remember if that's even true at all. So I guess we'll get there, or he'll just be straight. Because this one he's like immediately a little bit like misogynistic. Where he's like, where are the honeys? And like,
we're on the subject
why aren't there
of
any
William.
hot girls like this?
Well, we're on the subject of William. He is such a prick for being mad at people for asking if he uses a nickname. I have never
Oh
been
my
more
God, dude.
quickly like enraged at a character and like than I was whenever he was aggressive with people being like, "Oh, you use a nickname?" He's like, "Why would you think that I would do that? Do not call me Bill. Do not call me Willie. Willie, I am
Yeah.
William.
Yeah.
Don't you dare forget
I
it."
totally agree. I found that super annoying, but like after reading through it, I was like, that was a very good, very efficient use of panels to show this guy's personality a
That's
bit more.
fair.
Of
I
like,
gained strong
oh,
feelings on who he is as a
kind of
person very
douche.
quickly.
Like,
Yes.
yeah,
And, you know, there's a part of me that was very turned off by that. I do think, even just talking about it out loud, there is maybe a little bit of an element of like going to college, meeting new people, and being like, no, 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 no. This is my chance at a new identity. I cannot mess this
Yeah.
up. No one's going to call me Bill. I need to keep the version of myself I hoped I would be in college alive.
I can relate to that heavily. I still don't know whether or not I want to introduce myself as Zeb or Zebulon. I think at the beginning of this, I said both. Like,
You did. And I stopped myself from making a William joke, yes.
I completely relate to it, and I do think that it's just a good way to show that, yeah, a quick characterization of like, this guy's kind of self-obsessed, kind of a dick. The thing that annoyed me though is like, it's Will. Like, it's not the 1950s. We don't go from William to Bill. We go from William to Will. Like, if somebody introduces themselves, their name is William, right? Am I crazy here?
there's a
I
guy
get that
at
they're
work
both
who's-
it. I get that they're both it, but Will seems way more likely.
Yeah, definitely.
I work with a guy whose name is, you know, his like sign off name on his emails is all William in parentheses Bill last name.
Yeah, but is he old?
He's like 35 maybe.
Yeah, super old. No, I'm kidding.
I'm getting too old myself
Couldn't
to start
imagine
calling
being that
35-year-olds.
I know, bro.
I was interested by the introduction of Eve and the teen team. That just happened in a slightly different order than it happens in the show. I was interested that he gets involved with them so much quicker. I think it's issue 2 or 3. It's before we meet the Global Guardians.
Yeah.
And I like that was a little bit baked in quicker. I only saw about half of the second episode, but they wait until after the Global Guardians have already been killed by Omni-Man to introduce that
Even
team.
yeah.
Which I think in terms of showing what like the power structures of this world are and like how the world operates on with superheroes, I can see where the show wanted to set that up from the jump. But I did enjoy in the comic, which I also think that the comic is more frequently from Mark's point of view than the show is, which does oscillate who we're following. If Mark leaves the room, we don't always cut to the next thing Mark's doing. Sometimes we linger with the parents in a room or with other people who aren't Mark and get their perspective.
Yeah, it feels
which
like
I
you're
think is
in
good.
it with Mark.
Yeah, I think the only issue that you're not watching from Mark's perspective is the Global Guardians issue 7. As you kind of rapid fire go through them. And besides that, I think everything does kind of stay through Mark's perspective, which I think is on par for what a lot of these superhero stories are doing at the time. I mean, when you're reading a Spider-Man comic, you're pretty much getting Spider-Man in every panel of every issue. You're not tending to hang out with Aunt May, although I'd read that book any day of the week. And so I appreciated the show being willing to expound on those ways one of the few things I liked the comic more was getting involved with the teen team earlier on, because that would be a stepping stone in his journey. Even if the Global Guardians news would, shake the whole world and shake all the superheroes in it.
I remember as a kid just being obsessed with the teen team and just was so desperately wanting to hang out in that bridge, man. Being able to be in a secret bridge base with all these cool people with superpowers. Oh my god. Would did you read comics at all as a youth, Douglas?
I went through a phase where like my parents would take me to vintage stock and let me get a random assortment of like the $2 comics, and I really liked Iron Man. Spider-Man was my favorite as well. Still is my favorite hero. Which I know is not super original. But no, I never was too deep into comics as a kid. Just would read the odd one here and there. And really the only like stuff I've read seriously since then, or like Connor mentioned in the intros, was Brian K. Vaughan stuff that Connor let me borrow, Saga and Why the Last Man, his graphic novels. So I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to comics.
It feels very comic booky. Like, I love the way Invincible's panels are set up. I love the little introductions into a scene, where sometimes the narrator has like a little bit of character to it, and gives you like a little joke or a little insight. That's something that feels like they're not trying to hide the fact that at times it's just the author talking to you, and getting that spin of like. I remember feeling like Invincible like filled a hole, was like, I want Spider-Man, but I want it to be my Spider-Man, And like that is how Invincible felt. Very, very similar to these other worlds, and taking everything like pretty much straight from a good old DC or Marvel comic.
Yeah, I love that the world feels as big as it does so quickly. I think whether it is a film adaptation of Marvel or DC, or it is indie comics, I think sometimes there can be this desire to introduce the world along with its main character. And so the world gets bigger as the character steps into it. And I really appreciate that Invincible feels so built out that a young teenager getting his powers has a world to explore. And these things, the world has operated without him and doesn't necessarily need him. He is choosing to enter it, and he is choosing to get engaged with these things. It's something
and
that...
they don't really care.
Yeah, like, they don't. Yeah,
nobody cares that Invincible exists now.
Yeah, it was one of the things that I really praised. A movie I think we have different opinions on, Zeb, but James Gunn's 2025 Superman. One of my favorite things about that movie is how lived in it feels, and that Superman is the first character to ever have powers in that world, and instead he's entering a world that already feels fleshed out.
I love that too. I rewatched Superman, and I like Superman. It's a good movie, and it's we'll just piss off as many people as we can as quickly as possible. It is so much better than anything Zack Snyder could ever do.
Yes, if we need to stake a flag here, I am on. My flag is wherever Zack Snyder's isn't.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're James Gunn guys. Okay, if you're a Snyder fan, if you even like Man of Steel or 300, I want you dead. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, if anyone wants to have a rigorous discourse about Zack Snyder, I have seen all of his movies. I am genuinely fascinated by the man because I have no idea what the hell is going on in that artistic mind of his. And I'd love to crack the code.
300.
300 is cool.
Wish I loved 300. It has a lot of cool moments, and also...
Oh, that's the only reason I like it.
I'm told there's a story in there somewhere, but I have yet to find it, even with my magnifying glass.
I've watched that movie maybe 8 or 9 times over my life, and I couldn't tell you where the story is. It's just badass.
Yeah, my magnifying glass is just picking up a lot of abs, not many, not much story.
Oiled, slicked up abs, cutting heads off. That's all.
But yes, anyway, not to derail us too much.
No, let's derail. Connor, did you know that they worked out, like how the guys actually worked out?
I'm sorry.
Doesn't that do anything for you?
Can you say that again?
300 guys?
Oh, yeah.
300 guys to get those abs. They were doing the workouts that apparently the Romans or whatever, Spartans. The Spartans were doing. They were doing real Spartan workouts. Okay.
Oh, really?
You know, if I had my Amazon settings
I think
on,
yeah. I
What?
think
What do you- how
no.
do you
No,
know?
I do remember that being like
if I had
we were actually like doing what they did.
if I had my Amazon settings turned on so that the IMDb trivia facts were on the left side of my screen as I watched, I might have loved that movie. But unfortunately, I had that setting turned off, and it didn't have quite as good of a time.
There is something about like the hyper stylistic kind of Matrix bullet time slow mo ripoff stuff that he does. It works well in 300. It doesn't work in every movie that he makes.
Yes,
but yeah, whatever.
Since we've gone this far on Zack Snyder, I'll just say my thesis, if I've ever found one on him, is I think a lot of people will try to dig into this pseudo philosophical themes that he puts in his movies and want to talk about the darkness as if that makes it adult and interesting and has depth. And I think Zack Snyder is just a dumb film bro, and I mean that optimistically. I mean that in the nicest way I can say. Like, I think the issue I as an audience have with Zack Snyder is trying to believe he put intention into what he was creating. And I think a lot of the times his intention was that slow-mo scene was sick as hell. That lighting looked rad. And it does look rad.
And I think sometimes
and he's right.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Like 300 was one of those movies that I watched way too young because like my dad thought that I would think it was cool and like my mom didn't want me to watch it, but he was like, you can watch it. And I was like a little boy and I was like, this is awesome.
Oh yeah.
And now I just throw it on sometimes. I'm like, it's cool. And I think it's fine if that's where something starts and ends. Of it.
Oh, totally. I mean, to be real, like I don't know, like wanting to like eventually make big movies myself. Like if Zack Snyder wanted to talk with me about making something, like I would be all ears. I think his style is really solid, and yeah. I think he does put. I think he does actually put quite a bit of intention into the style, but it's really heavy-handed. Like, I actually think like he's almost vomiting intention at times. Like, I think it's like certainly sometimes he's just doing slow-mo and they're like, why was it this? And it's because at the end of the day he liked it, but like. You know, the Jesus motifs and all of the Superman stuff. It's like you couldn't be more heavy-handed with it being like, this is God. Like, this is the Lord. This is the Savior.
I think that he thinks power
that doesn't
is
make
cool,
it good either.
And I don't know that he has any other thoughts on power than power is badass. And so yeah, I think he does
looks kind of like
this,
Jesus,
like,
don't
love
it?
Of Superman and Jesus and God being the same guy, and also to devolve Clark Kent into just a powerful dude strips a lot of what's great about that character away from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's in a lot of his movies. Like, I think 300 is about the most powerful people going against the underdog, and how the real power comes from brotherhood and ripped abs. And I think that his owl movie, Guardians of Ga'Hoole, is about like intricate fascist owl power systems that create arbitrary laws that govern owl kind. Big recommendation, best Zack Snyder movie, Guardians of Ga'Hoole.
I was gonna say, speaking of style though, and like where his style works, is like. You put that boy in animation.
Oh, like, yeah.
I think he works with these very, like, simplistic themes, like these very, like, easy to grasp themes, even if they're, like, darker themes.
Definitely.
They're not super deep, but that works pretty well in a kid's movie.
Yeah,
right?
It does.
Like, let's, like, tell them fascism's bad with owls. And like slow motion and as much slow motion lightning as possible, and make those feathers look wet and
And they do. He has an eye for
Those
imagery.
feathers look wet.
And when you can animate anything that your mind can envision, Zack Snyder has the tools to make something that looks incredibly compelling. So yeah, I completely agree.
More animated movies.
Was that
less sucker
was
porn.
that horrible 4-hour zombie movie in Las Vegas him?
Yeah.
I would consider that one of his better works, but yeah.
Okay. I did not like that one.
Yep, and then he graced us with Rebel Moon 1 and 2, and then said, "Oh ho ho, did you want 4-hour cuts of those?" And we all said no, and he released them anyway. So
wait, is there actually? There's a what was that movie called? The Dave Bautista zombie Las Vegas one. Land of the Dead.
It is something of the Dead because it's playing off of the Dawn of the Dead, which of course he directs Dawn of the Dead in I think 2000.
Army of the Dead.
Army of the Dead. Yep.
Yeah, because he did the remake of Dawn of the Dead. I think that was his,
written by James Gunn. That is actually my favorite Zack Snyder movie. Probably is Dawn of the Dead. I love joking about the owl movie, but I really enjoy Dawn of the Dead, and I think it sings because it has these awesome visuals from Zack Snyder, but it has a script from James Gunn who knows how to put in these bombastic set pieces that also say something about the characters that are within them.
You know, these movies and comic books and everything, like I remember my mom even thinking that like comic books were had to have been written and drawn and inked by the same people. Like she just didn't see how it was like a 3-person job.
Yep.
Or possibly in some instances like a dozen or 20 people's job, right? And movies are not made alone, is my point. None of the very few great pieces of art are made alone. And so, like, if Zack Snyder needs a good writer, he's still a good director. Like, he is still a good filmmaker. And to make an even... I don't want to constantly be backing up my critiques of people, but I feel the need to say it a little bit. Like, I'll all day shit on Zack Snyder's writing and talk about how bad his movies are. At the end of the day, Zack Snyder is actually doing some incredible work, and it is an extremely talented guy. Like, he probably, if you sat down in a room and talked with him about his ideas and what he knows about cameras and what he knows about style and what he, you know, the amount of intent he puts into each shot, it's probably mind-blowing and probably, you know, makes you question how the fuck, like, a Stanley Kubrick even exists.
Sure.
You know, because he to make a dog shit movie, he's probably a pretty good filmmaker. Like,
and
it is just that difficult. So it's like, pair my boy up with a good writer. Like, there was, I don't know, people need something to balance out their worst instincts.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more that
a lot of filmmakers.
I couldn't agree more that Zach, with not writing his own material, would be a very exciting next step for his career. And I also just want to say, while I am happy to discuss criticisms or positive things about Zack Snyder all the time, he is reportedly one of the nicest guys in Hollywood. And while his work doesn't speak to me, there are so many assholes that I respect the work of running around Hollywood that I am more than happy to compliment the personal life and personal choices of a person whose work doesn't resonate with me. And so shout out to him for seemingly being able to laugh at himself and being an all-around good dude.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys want a 6.5 hour Invincible live action Zack Snyder movie.
I'll kill myself. I'll kill myself.
I do think that would be bad news.
Dude, it would be the worst, bro.
Like,
it could be like Invincible meets Passion of the Christ.
Let's talk about Debbie written by Zack Snyder.
Oh, she'd be so hot.
Her meals would be the best meals you've ever seen as she sits alone with no dialogue.
Yeah, is there anything more we want to talk about with Invincible? Do you guys have any hot takes with Invincible? Like, Man, I'm trying to think if I have
I don't
any
know if we
hot
talked
take.
about Eve very much. Not that there's a ton of Eve stuff. I feel like the biggest thing is just her being a girl at Mark's school that he bumps into, and then her crying about Rex cheating on her with the duplicate. Um,
Rough, bro.
yes,
Can you imagine?
Yeah,
Can you
wild.
imagine being Eve? Oh man, that would be so shitty. Oh man, I would cry a lot.
given how small that team is, it's like four people, and then at some point, the robot is like, "Hey, I might head out." By the way, I'm like, "What's holding this team together?" There's now one guy with his foot out the door, and the other three members involve a dude in the middle of is it a love triangle? If she can multiply
Like
into
a
different
love
people,
pentagram or something.
exactly. Eve is
I don't
very
know.
outnumbered in whatever
It would be horrible to
love
witness.
shape this is. And then her and Mark getting caught by Debbie and coming downstairs for their chat. I don't
I
feel
like
like
how nice she is about that.
yes.
Like she doesn't get mad about it at all. She's just like, "Yes, I'll take the lecture from your mom." It's actually like she seems to be almost charmed by the fact that Debbie is lecturing them.
Yep.
I thought that was a cute characterization because I felt like where I thought that was going to go was it was going to be very bad for Mark, where it's like, I'm having this terrible time and now your mom's ripping into me. Like,
I wonder if some of that, only because I assume we all have seen a bit more just because of the show. I wonder if her reaction to that is because we know like about her home life and how her parents are. Maybe neglectful is maybe
Yeah.
the word, or I don't know. There's probably a better word to use. So I wonder if that's why she almost found it endearing that his mom
Somebody
wanted
cared.
to give them the talk. Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, my favorite Debbie stuff from the comics that we read, not from the show, probably is her sitting them down and being like, "Hey, we just need to have a chat about responsibility. I know I can't stop you. You all could literally go fuck on an island if you wanted to."
yeah, you can fuck on an island an hour away.
So I found that endearing, and I don't think it transcends the kind of simple way her character is portrayed and with just really maternal motives. But I did like that moment.
Speaking of just like thinking about the characters, what's your guys' favorite character design? I love Invincible's suit. I think
It's a very good
I loved
suit.
it when I was a kid. I think it's like I feel like honestly like it does feel like a very important part of any like superhero comic is what does your superhero look like? And like I don't know if Invincible would be half as successful if it wasn't for that sick ass suit. I just think it's dope.
I liked
It's
the
very cool.
early suits that he tries on, both the one that's essentially just
Yeah.
his pajamas and stuff he has laying around, and then the first suit that the suit maker has him try on.
The
I
orange
don't,
one.
yeah, I don't think that that line is in the show, but I also thought it was a smart way to say whenever the suit maker guy says, "Ah, yes, I have all these solar panels on here because I at one point assumed that your powers would be solar based." And I now understand
It's like, I
that's
thought you
not
were
the
Superman.
case. Exactly. I thought it was a very small way to sneak in a line that's like, hey, we're all very used to Superman's powers, and Invincible very much will have a lot of those powers. But don't make the mistake of thinking that those powers come from the same place. These are intrinsic
Yes.
powers that aren't solar dependent or dependent on any other outside source to fuel you up.
Yeah, I also love I love how they treat the powers in Invincible. I like that he has to hold his breath in space. Like he can't just breathe. Like I'm sure that's in other comics and stuff, but generally I feel like that's brushed over, and he's good as long as he holds his breath is really fun.
And how like that's another example of like strength where Nolan's like, I can hold my breath for 2 weeks, but he was fighting Alan for a few minutes, and he was still like, oh man, I gotta take a breath. But
yeah, he had to go back down real quick.
I feel like there's an amount of panic there where it's not even about his physicality as much as him like getting his mind to a place where he doesn't feel like he's missing a core part of living by breathing. Like whenever people are underwater and you'll hear experts say like, hey, you're not really fighting against your lungs whenever you're underwater for more than a minute or two. You're really fighting against your fight or flight response to say that like, this is uncomfortable. My body is not used to this. I am just so anxious that I have to go up for air, or in this case, go down for air.
Did I finish the reason that there was the controversy with Robert Kirkman and the original artist is that original artist couldn't keep up. He really wanted it to come out like at a standard rate, and he was determined to make it basically the quickest. The way he remembers getting issues of comic books, and that other guy just couldn't keep up, so he just switched them out, even though I think that they were like homeboys creating a lot of these concepts together for a long time, and that's why there's a lot of the controversy. But
yeah, I mean that's unfortunate, and also like I would assume that these came out monthly, especially because that seems baked into the comics themselves, where they will say like, it's been 1 month since I met you, and it was like, oh, that was last issue. So I am to assume that these do take place relatively in real time, and that 12 issues would be a year, which in theory is the case with Marvel and DC, but then they always shrink their timeline so that all of their oldest characters can still be 35 and hot. But I that would make sense if you were the minimum you would want to release a new issue is monthly. Like there are certainly some series who do twice a month, or go every other week, but it would be hard to remain relevant, especially as a new title, if you're not consistently coming out the same week of each month.
I had I just looked it up. It looked like they were coming out monthly, but the series became notorious for missing those dates, particularly I guess towards the end of the series. They were missing quite a few windows to get it out monthly. From what I've read on Reddit, we can't expect some more switching back and forth as we get further. Otley, I believe, is the primary artist throughout the entire run. But I don't know what the circumstances were, but I do know there is switching back and forth.
Oh,
and
so the original artist comes back?
I don't know if it's the original artist who comes back, but I have just seen some warnings online that it might be a bit jarring, that it's pretty noticeably different at times.
Interesting. Yeah, I will say, like, looking at a lot of these panels in comparison to the show, you do sometimes wish that television animation could have a bigger budget, because there is oftentimes a lot of like detail and style in these panels that you just don't get in the show. Like I don't know if you guys can see this right now, but
oh yes,
yeah, this is so gay. As he carries his friend. But like even just his face there, you would never catch that much movement in his face in the show. Anything else? I was looking at some of these behind the scenes pages to see if there was anything interesting I wanted to throw out there.
I'm jealous that y'all's volumes have that. I have my big giant ass compendium here, and nice. It was a great deal, and also does not have a lot of that cool behind the scenes stuff. So I'm excited that you're able to show that off. I had a really good time revisiting the beginning of the story, and I think it is helping me appreciate the way that the show adapts the material even more, while finally getting a chance to read through this source material I've been curious about for a long time. So I thought it was a good start. I think it has a couple moments of it's an early 2000s thing, and whether that be the comments about how gay it is to fly with your bro, or a few other moments. There's a few of those early 2000s cringy moments, but for the most part, I think it really holds up well. I think you can see where there was a lot of material to be extrapolated on from the world that they set up, and I think they do a good job of making the world feel big and fully realized while keeping it from Mark's point of view. So I'm excited to see where we go from here, and to keep watching the episodes along with it to see what that adaptation process looked like.
I'd fly you bros around.
I was gonna say, dude, I would love for you, either of you
I'd fly
gentlemen,
with you bros too.
To lift me up. I did want to, before I hop off, just because I felt like we kept almost having this discussion, but didn't quite, Douglas. I don't feel like we talked our shit as much as I wanted to. What didn't you like about it?
My biggest problem with the pacing throughout these first two volumes was that some of it just felt too fast. And again, I know you're maybe a bit more limited in what you can do in a single issue or a collection of 8 issues, but I think like even the fights in particular, they, big bad guy shows up, he punches them once, and then it's on to the next thing.
I think that's
And
certainly a big feature of the show is these very well designed, hyper violent action scenes. And there's no doubt that those are relegated to a page or two. And like the leader of the Global Guardians head getting chopped off, I had to kind of like go back and forth on that page a little bit because the comic itself didn't feel like it choreographed super effectively for me how he went from his head on his shoulders to it rolling on the ground next to him. And I agree that because the show especially has such an emphasis on how impressive those sequences are, the how simply and how crudely they're shown in the comic feels underwhelming. I do think that I found the pacing being very breezy to be a pro for me, especially just comparing to a lot of like DC or Marvel comics. Like this is a pretty clean looking book. It is not like littered with dialogue down the page where you're spending more time reading than looking at images. Honestly, this page that we're on now feels like it has more dialogue than most. I think the first like 4 or 5 pages of the first issue are largely him just like flying around, and you can rush through those first 4 or 5 pages in less than a minute. And I was able to read most of these this afternoon. I don't think it ever took me more than like 10 minutes to read an individual issue. And there's so many other comics out there that would get so heavy into their lore and explanations of things that it would take twice that amount of time because there would be a lot more panels, and those panels would each half be filled with a text box as dialogues going back and forth. And I appreciated the pace a little bit, but I definitely think it is a little surprising to be 8 issues deep and be like, oh, have we even done episode 2 of the show yet fully?
I definitely agree with some of what you said. Like I think for me, it's not even necessarily that it did have that breezy vibe to it. I think for me, maybe the pacing just to me is what resulted in there being a bit less depth to some of the characters. Because like the fights being, just a few panels is one thing, but I also think that just some of that depth between characters wasn't there. And I'm not even asking for like walls of text on the lore or anything like that, but I think maybe if a bit more time was spent on some of the character interactions, again, like we had mentioned earlier, like between Nolan and Mark regarding him not having his powers yet, like that little bit of tension right there, I think that is more interesting than what we got in the comics. But I do think that in terms of lore, I think it does a really good job of efficiently saying things. Like we had mentioned, the world does already feel big. We really only get 2 instances where they talk about like intergalactic stuff. It's whenever that right there where Nolan is telling Mark where he came from, and then whenever Alan the alien first shows up. And I think those are 2 very efficient efficient in a good way uses of space and panels to give a glimpse into like, oh shit, there's like intergalactic stuff going on. And then bring the focus back home. So I do think that sometimes the pacing is very good.
I agree with what you're saying.
But I think at times it can harm it a bit.
As far as the lore is concerned, I do love the fact that the way that they introduce the characters, the way that they in a page let you figure out which DC comic book character you're looking at, or you're getting a parody of now, and also just like Mark and his friends. Like, it doesn't feel like you get to a page and you're like, okay, let me read about this fucking guy for ever and ever. You can actually just move through it, zip through it.
I think the plot and exposition is really well balanced, but I do agree that there's some character and story work, and I say story to mean themes, not plot, that I think needs a little bit more fleshing out and isn't present in these issues yet.
Yeah, like I don't know, some of the writing just feels I think Doug put it like a 13-year-old was putting it together. Like there is some very basic stuff that makes it feel a bit too little kiddish for me. Like it just feels maybe a little bit too light. But I like that, of course, that gets contrasted with him, ripping off heads, like you said, and it actually kind of works in its favor. The one other thing I wanted to mention about the comic book art also, comic book art a lot of times gets really crazy. Like, panels are all overlapping and combining with each other. And there's actually a video of a comic book artist giving, like, up and coming, he's a Marvel Comics artist, giving comic book artists advice, like up and coming comic book artists. If you want to work for Marvel, do this, do this, do this. And he was talking about how keeping your panels actually in the boxes and making it very simple and very easy for your reader to go, left to right, top to bottom. Bubbles are very simple, and these pages are beautiful. Like, I love the simplicity of all of these pages and the big gaps in between panels and all of that. Like, it is a really very simple but like gorgeous design on this whole thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I actually had a thought while reading it that I felt like I was learning to like appreciate a simpler style in that way. Because like I had mentioned, the only comics or graphic novels that I had read were stuff from Brian K. Vaughan. And I forget the name of the artist on Saga.
Fiona Staples.
Those panels
are
like stunning, gorgeous, detailed things I've ever seen. So in one way, I'm spoiled that that's kind of my only like example that I've seen. But also learning to appreciate a more simple style that is still very good and interesting. I did have that thought.
There's more than a few full page uses, but I don't think we've had any double page full splashes yet. And I look forward to see when they might first decide to do that, because sometimes I think that's really telling, especially for an artist, but also a writer, to say, like, what is the thing that you want to have this, like, wow moment of emphasis? And 2 full pages with 1 giant image can be very evocative. And I don't think that there's anything that felt like it needed to do that here and was missing it. But I also am curious when we'll see it pop up.
There is one full page. I'm gonna try to pull it up for us here. Oh,
I think you bet.
Oh, okay, yeah, there. That is nice. Good double page of the Global Guardians.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good place for it too. Right before they're getting their heads chopped off.
Yep.
It's like, here's everybody all in
Who's
one.
your favorite Global Guardian?
I like this guy's pretty great. That has to eat a thing to be his guy.
I love the speedster.
Green
I love
Ghost.
even just the quick
Red
things
Rush.
they do with him.
Yes,
he's on a date with his girlfriend.
Yep, that's my favorite too. I love Red Rush.
He goes and saves the world really quick.
And I
promise you'd listen to me.
And I love that he's from Russia, and that there's a bit of a more international angle there. Like, I more than fine with him not like creating a lot of fictional places. Like, it seems that Aqueous was from Atlantis, but most of the other places were like, it's Boston. War Woman is from Boston, and this is in New York. And I think the Batman plug-in did have his own city, but I appreciated how Red Rush was from Moscow, and it felt like there was a smart balance of the locations they chose to make it feel global.
I believe next week, if we do 2 volumes again, I'm not sure what we're wanting.
I think we should. Yeah, 2
you know,
volumes makes sense.
Just because I've read a little bit ahead, a little teaser. I believe we will get to some Atlantis fun that I'm almost positive I'm correct in remembering was not in the TV show.
I don't remember much Atlantis stuff, so that sounds exciting.
It's a bit out there.
Hell yeah.
Dark?
No.
Eternal darkness.
Not dark. A bit sexy.
Oh,
okay.
Sexy fish
the
people.
Fish guy.
Yeah.
They're already slippery.
I also, one last little note here, and we can, I guess, hop off. But I freaking love the way that this guy does noses. I love that little circle, that little button.
It's a good button.
He does it on like pretty much everything. Like just that little curve right there. I don't know if love his little noses, man. They're so good.
Good noses, guy. Should have just drawn him faster.
Yeah, you could have kept up.
Yeah, could have gotten rid of the button and kept your job.
Kept your job.
Wait, what?
I said you could have gotten rid of the button nose and kept your job.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd have been a little bit faster. I also love, this is just consistently done in art with color theory, but I love the way they depict nighttime in this. Just the all blue. Everything is just a shade of blue.
Definitely.
Super, super pretty. Yeah, great series. Kind of just a little bit boring and little kiddish at the beginning here, but I know it's just gonna pick up its depth with the characters, and the story's gonna get more and more intense. All right, cool. Well, we'll try to do her again next week. Issues
Fantastic.
9 through something.
9 to something. Hell yeah.